Hey folks, this is Matt Rainwater, and today for Talk and Draw, we're going to be doing a little bit of a walkthrough on my process for lettering. Now, I talked a little bit about lettering last episode when I was talking about thumbnails, and very briefly, what I talked about is what that lettering process looks like on a general level, right? So, I talked about how I start from a place of I write out a script for the dialogue, right? Um, or let's start all the way from the beginning. Thumbnails, drawing, coloring, and then after coloring comes lettering. But before I'm actually putting like font on the page, I'm doing a redraft of the dialogue that I've written in my thumbnails. And that's a pretty, I mean, I'm not going to show you all this process. I'll just describe it to you very quickly before we get into the actual meat and potatoes of lettering. And that process is basically I have my thumbnails, which is in a sketchbook, and then I have the finished colored page. And I'm taking both of those things, looking at them, comparing them, seeing what changes I've made in the finished colored page versus the thumbnails, and then that influences changes that I'm going to be making in redrafting the dialogue. So I do that final draft on the dialogue. It's in a little notepad document, like a little dinky, notepad document that I'm just. It's very disposable, right? Like after the episode's done, I usually delete it and move on. So I've got all of that in my notepad, all of the redrafted dialogue, and then what I'm doing from there is I'm copy pasting that dialogue into the when I'm making the finished page, and that's what we'll go over right now. What that process looks like, and so I'm taking a page from season 4. This is the episode where Jake goes to what did I call it? The meta ophthalmologist um, to get his third eye checked out, right? And he's having a conversation here with Lenny, and Lenny's telling him about how he pretty much failed his licensing exam. And I'm gonna just mess around here, right, with the dialogue to kind of show y'all what does that process look like when I'm making all this dialogue. And I'm gonna real quickly I'm gonna copy and paste, or I'm gonna copy this text before we get rid of it all. Get rid of all of it. It's gone. And I'm also going to show you how I do sound effects. So, all right, first of all, I have the text that I want to use for the panel copied. It's on the clipboard. And unfortunately, because of the arrangement of my Photoshop thing, y'all can't really see, y'all probably can't see the cursor I'm using. Maybe y'all can. But what I'm doing is I have the text cursor selected, and I'm creating a little dialog box. And let's talk very briefly about font size. So if you're working on Webtoon, your font size, I'm just going to copy, I'm going to paste this real quick. Your font size can be whatever you want. I think that generally editors recommend a 36 point. So that's very different from print. 36 point is gigantic on print, but that's the appropriate size for generally the appropriate size for a Webtoon format. And you can eyeball it, of course. You'll figure it out as you go along making your comic. Oh, this is probably a more appropriate size. Maybe it's 36, maybe it's 34, maybe it's 20. I've seen all kinds of sizes for fonts on Webtoons. I've seen fonts where I'm like, oh, it's a little small, and I've seen fonts where, oh, that's a little too big. And I've seen both of those on my own Webtoon. So, just to give you context. Nevertheless, it is a trial and error type process. And it's the kind of process where you figure it out as you go along. And you make mistakes and, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just deformatting this text real quick because I want to make a point to y'all in a little bit. Um, so do I have anything left to say about font size or fonts in general? If y'all are independently creating your own comic, which I am, but this still stands even if you're not making it independently, there is a service called Blambot. Blambot Comics, they have a roster of professionally designed comic book fonts. So I use Blambot. I paid for my license with them to use this font that I love called Anime Ace. It's one of my favorite fonts. I would say it's probably become more and more standard, especially on a lot of webtoon. I see Anime Ace a lot. I see other Blambot type fonts used a lot. The the license to use them, if you're just doing it independently and you're not publishing with anybody, is free. If you are publishing with somebody, there's a very slight licensing fee you have to pay, and it's very affordable. It doesn't really cost very much. I highly recommend Blambot if you're gonna use fonts. That being said, you can also create your own fonts, and I have a small roster of fonts that I have created that I will use from time to time. And I mostly use them nowadays for sound effects, although not all of them. Let's see, I'm going to find. So I have one font I created made sans serif. If I can find it. Can I not? What is up? It doesn't want me to find it. I'm going to have to look for it the hard way. Where is sans serif? It is, so... Oh, no, it's not sans serif. It's serif sans. Isn't it? Yeah, it's serif sans. I had it mixed up. I had it in reverse because it's a joke. Anyway, that's not it. So yeah, this is serif sans. This is the font that I use for a Rhesus dialogue, or if there's any sort of like ancient type thing going on. It's also a font that I used in Bat Monster. So, oh wait, what is the phrase that they use? The quick brown fox jumped over, I think it's over the lazy dog. So, didn't take very long for me to create this font. Hold on, I'm going to do something real quick. This is what I usually do when I'm lettering anyway, is I bring the opacity down on the image layer so I can see my lettering better. Alright, cool. So I'm just typing this out to give you an example. You will notice a couple of things right off the bat. This was a font that I designed, so it has all of the flaws of something that comes from somebody who is an amateur designing their own font. One of those big ones right now, as you can tell, is the Q. That little tail on the Q is bumping in on the M on the sentence below it. So I frequently have to make adjustments to kerning and all that stuff just to make it work, which isn't a big deal. It doesn't. It's not. Oh, I'm gonna have to do it for that one too. It's not something that is like a make or break for me. I can do those little tweaks here and there if I have to. In Photoshop, I'd say Photoshop is a much better tool for doing that versus Clip Studio, at least based on my current knowledge of Clip Studio. I've messed around with Clip Studio a little bit with lettering or with fonts, and I'm not very well adapted to its text tools, and to me, it doesn't seem like it's as intuitive as Photoshop's. Photoshop, I think, part of the reason why I still use Photoshop in my suite of programs, which is just two, which is Clip Studio and Photoshop, The main reason I use Photoshop still is to do layouts and to do all my dialogue. So anyway, that gives you sort of an idea of what that part of the process looks like. And then here's the other. I'll show you all the other. I'm gonna type it out real quick. Oh no, never mind. I'll do this the other way. The other font that I use frequently in Trailer Park Warlock is a font I created called Bat Monster Sans, because it is one of the two main dialogue fonts that I used in the comic Bat Monster. So, quick brown fox jumps. I don't think this is the actual thing that they type out. I think the idea is that this uses every letter in the alphabet. So once again, so this is Bat Monster Sans. Once again, I have to make little tiny adjustments here and there to make the font slightly more palatable. Another note that I think is worth mentioning. So generally, there's a huge rule in regards. Let me preface what I'm about to say. The thing about lettering is there are a lot of little tiny rules that are very specific to specific letters in the alphabet. And one of the big ones is the letter I. So the biggest rule about the letter I is that if you're going to refer to the pronoun I, as in I am speaking to y'all right now, right? You use this, I don't know if you call that the serifs. You use the I with the two the two horizontal bars, right? If, however, you are using the letter I as just, the letter I, right? As you would normally use it for, the word quick, right? Generally what I do is I use a lowercase l. And then sometimes I'll use, like if it's sound effects, I'll use a lowercase I. So, how about, like, squick? Although that would be in Bat Monster Sans, because Bat Monster Sans is my main sound effects font. So, a lot of variability with the letter I, right? You want, the main reason this is, why this rule exists, and you don't have to stick to this rule. There are plenty of people who don't stick with it. I stick with it because I think it actually makes the readability of the text easier. I think that there is a very big differentiation to say I as the pronoun and then just using the letter I, right? Those are two very different things, and you want, like, it wouldn't work to use a lowercase I for I, right? Like when you're for the pronoun I, because when you're using the pronoun I, this is at least how we have socialized ourselves as English-speaking people. We use a capital I. That's how that's worked. So this is just like as an organizational tool, right? Because so much of comics is about organization of all of your elements, and lettering is specifically a specifically very particular way to organize information. And I'm sure that there are ways that I do lettering that if you compared it to how editors look at doing prose books, they would say that I'm doing it wrong. So everybody's got different rules for different scenarios, for different situations, and I'm not the final source on this. I would recommend, if you have any other questions, you can ask me, of course. I will happily answer. or I could even make it another video, or I can respond to you in the comments. These are one of those things where there's a lot of fine tuning involved. So, why do I use? So, another question that might be worth asking: why do I use different fonts for different characters? Right? Like, why do I use? And I kind of talked about it a little bit earlier. Like, why do I use serif sans for like? Is that what I call it? Yeah, it's serif sans. I don't know. I called it serif sans because I was playing on sans serif, and now I cannot remember what I originally named it. And like, because to me they sound like the same thing, so I kind of trolled myself. Anyway, so why do I use serif sans for Eris? Hold on, I want to select. Why do I use it for Eris's dialogue? And why do I use anime ace for like basically everybody else's dialogue? There are a couple of people. There are a couple other characters I can think of. I use some different font, but why is anime ace like the standard? I set up anime ace as the standard because that was like just for readability. That's the default voice. And then I had serif sans to establish like these different grades of like different ways of speaking. So like another aspect of Eris, right, is that he has the way that he talks. He has these. I feel like I need to find the page so I can show y'all. He doesn't speak like a regular dialogue balloon. He speaks with a word. He speaks with a thought balloon, basically. And I wanted to establish that as Eris's like basically psychic in a sense, or he speaks through telepathy. This might take me too long to find. No, I got it. All right, let me show y'all real quick what I mean, right? And y'all have seen this. So this is Eris's voice, right? And I very deliberately decided that I wanted Eris to have these thought balloons for his text to imply that the way that he's speaking does not involve opening his mouth. He's basically speaking thoughts at people in some kind of telepathic sense. And then additionally, I'm using serif sans to give this ancient, formal quality to the way that he's speaking. And then there have been characters, for instance, back in season 2, when Ravenstone turns into her lowest will form, I use serif sans, and then I make her dialogue all caps. Once again, I'm trying to devise like a voice that's separate from Ravenstone's regular voice, because Ravenstone's regular voice is in anime ace, right? This is anime ace. So the whole idea of that is to create character or to create greater depth in the character. And clearly I'm not going to make a font for every single character in the comic, right? I have to do that through other means for all of the human characters, right? I have to do that through styling of dialogue, right? Because the way that Jake talks is completely different from the way that Lenny McKinney talks, right? Let me find Jake's dialogue real quick. Yeah, I mean, like, Jake speaks in an aw shucks kind of way, whereas Lenny McKinney speaks in a very verbose, professorial kind of manner. So those are other ways that you're creating more depth in your characters. So all that said, let's do one last part that I want to get to, and I want to talk about another important rule in regards to lettering, which is I don't know what the actual name of the rule is, but basically, the idea is you're creating diamond shapes with your sentences, which is to say, you have, let me lay this out real quick. You want it longer in the middle. This is going to be a hard one to do this with. Because you want your dialogue to fit within a balloon, right? Within a circular, ovular type framework. And because font is basically all lots of little rectangles when you lay it out as shapes, you're trying to make a compositional compromise, right? Because the two don't necessarily match together all that well all the time. So you're basically making these diamonds with the dialogue. By the way, this is like not. I mean, I'm just using this to give y'all an example. You're creating these diamond type shapes so that when you go to make your balloons, right, they fit into these ovals nice and neatly. And there are additional things that you learn over time as you're lettering where you can create better flow of the sentence. So you can see I did that again with the quick brown fox type stuff over here. Trying to make sure that my face is not getting in the way. Over here, right? This is something that over time I just start doing completely intuitively. So very quickly, I'll just give you all a brief sort of rundown of how I make the word balloons. Not very complicated. I'm just using a path tool in Photoshop. I'm assuming that y'all can see the path tool. Yeah. And I'm not going to be particularly neat about it, right? I make the path tool, select the path, and then I fill it in. Okay. Oh, whoops. Put that on the balloons layer. I'm going to make a new layer. Put that in the balloons layer. And you make your tail. This is not going to be precise at all, so forgive me. And then once you've made the whole structure of the balloon, you're going to select all that white interior. You go to stroke. And then generally I use, I wonder if y'all can see this. Nope, y'all can't see what I'm doing. So I'm going to edit. I'm going to stroke. There's a little dialog box that comes up, and you can pick your pixel size, like for the width. You pick the location. The location is center. The width is 7 pixels. Click OK, and you create that outline for the balloon. Unfortunately, I can't show y'all every little step, but you can definitely find resources for this also elsewhere on YouTube. This is just very brief. And then that's how you make a word balloon. So one last thing I want to go over just for really quickly. Sound effects. Sound effects are a curious thing because I'm kind of still learning, quite honestly. To be totally truthful with y'all, I'm still learning how to do sound effects. And for me, the thing that I have a little bit of trouble with is picking a voice for the sound effects. I've been pretty much sticking with Bat Monster songs for most of my sound effects, and that's generally a good thing. If you have a separate font for all your sound effects versus your dialogue, you're codifying for your audience that they know that they're not going to mistake dialogue for sound and vice versa. Like, I know we all know technically this is all sound we're making with our mouth, sound we're making with our feet, blah, blah, blah. But once again, going back to this idea in lettering that you want to organize things in such a way that your reader understands intuitively what's happening on the page, and they're not having at all any kind of uncertainty about what they're reading. So one of the things that I do, right, is Bat Monster Sans is my usual um, sound effects voice. I definitely will use some other ones, like I've used Impact as a font for when the Penguins are chanting. There are a couple other ones that I use here and there for very specific purposes, but usually I'll use Bat Monster Sans. It's my favorite one for sound effects. It has a very organic quality to it that I think goes well with most of the sound effects that I make in this comic, because most of them are sort of organic sounds. So usually what I'll do is, I'll make the sound effects are usually going to be much bigger than the dialogue. They're going to stick out like that. And I usually want to also add a little bit, and you can do this with the text warping tool. Now, I'm using a very old version of Photoshop, by the way. I'm using like CS3. This is like more than might be 2 decades old at this point. So there are little bells and whistles that are now available in newer versions of Photoshop that are not necessarily available in this version. I just know all the tools in this one, and they do everything that I need, and there's nothing that I need to expand on for at least Trailer Park Warlock at the moment. So anyway, what I wanted to say is I like to add a little bit of I just want to shape, right, the word or the sound effects some, right? I want to give it a little bit more of a characteristic that's different from the rest of the dialogue, and also sort of responds with the force maybe of the sound that's being made. So maybe for a squick it wouldn't be like it'd actually be more concave than convex, right? You'd have the force pushing down on it, because that's kind of a sound effect they would use for like somebody maybe stepping on something squishy, right? And then what I like to do generally, not all the time, but generally, especially for sound effects that might pass over line art, I like to add a little bit of, I don't know what you would call it, like a halo or whatever around it. So it just stands out more. So I'm going to, same thing that I did with the word balloon, right? I'm going to stroke, and then I will usually fuss around a fair amount with the color of the sound effect. This is not something I'm necessarily going to get too deep into within the context of this little tutorial or video or whatever. Color is in itself its own language. So a red squick implies something very different from a yellow or a green. A red squick I might use if somebody is like squishing a mosquito, whereas a green squick might be, somebody stepping on, I don't know, a green blob or something. I don't know. But you get what I'm saying. Like, you want to, the colors that you use imply different qualities and aspects to the action you're trying to describe with your words. Like I said, lettering is something I'm still kind of learning right now. Like, I would not say that I'm necessarily an expert at it. It's something that I think that I'm proficient at and understand how to do well enough, right, to write a comic book professionally, but I would not necessarily say that I am at the same level maybe as a graphic designer, because graphic designers have a next level understanding of font that goes a little bit above and beyond where I currently am at, and will take time to learn over the course of my time, right? And I have been, right, over the course of making this comic. But that's what lettering is. Lettering is all graphic design. Technically, all comics is graphic design in a sense, but it's graphic design that also incorporates much, much deeper aspects of composition and drawing and life drawing and observational drawing and basically everything. That's why I like comics. It's kind of a multidisciplinary art form and requires you to wear a lot of different hats, juggle a lot of different plates. And once you've learned all those things, you kind of are in full control of your space, which I think is, for me, is fun. I enjoy doing it. It's why I'm making these stories. So anyway, hope that answers any questions y'all might have in regards to the lettering process. Like I said, if y'all have any other questions that y'all would like to ask me, please leave a comment in the comment section below. If you've enjoyed this video, found it helpful, please give it a like. If you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe. And I will be doing more videos like this and in other ways, because this talk and draw thing is kind of a free-form segment for me. The idea for me is, it's not necessarily a journal or diary, but it's just a way for me to sort of talk about topics that are on my mind and engage with y'all on a different level than I would in the commentaries. Because the Trailer Park Warlock commentaries are more, they're different from this. They just involve different sort of things. So anyway, hope you're having a good day, having a good time, and we will talk again soon, all right? I will see y'all then. All right, later.